there, women and girls around the world, and all the men who appreciate us, and all of the women who appreciate men and boys as well. I'm Chloe Taylor Brown, the host of The Chloe Show. First, we're going to be joined by my friend Glenn Barker from Mankind Project in Chicago. And first, I want to talk about what's going on in our society as far as, it's just so overwhelming to me, so I'm not going to even have this intro that I planned. I want to get right to it because today is very vital, and I do hope that men and boys around the world are listening too. And if you are, I want you to call in to share your thoughts, your comments, your suggestions, your solutions, if you have some, to the moral fiber of our families, our communities, and this country. Well, my first guest is Glenn Barker, and he is the president and executive director at Mankind Project Chicago. And it is really mentoring men because, you know, there are a lot of men who have not been mentored and developed. So his organization, Mankind Project, worldwide, it's all in America. There's in Chicago. Glenn is in Chicago. And we're going to directly talk about some things that have been going on in Chicago over this past weekend that were very disturbing. But first, let's give Glenn a big round of applause. Welcome to the Chloe Show, Glenn.
Hello, Chloe, and listeners. Glad to be back with you.
I'm so excited that you're back, and you're always really, really so informative and a wealth of knowledge and information that you're going to be sharing. But, Glenn, I was really disturbed when I was reading and watching and just hearing about what was going on in Chicago. It's not just statistic. This is real life about what is happening with all the shootings and the deaths and things that have been happening. Tell us about what's going on in your town.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank everybody for taking the time to try to get educated as well as informed. In Chicago, over the holiday weekend of the July 4th, there was 84 hours, there was 82 shootings. 16 were dead. That's the data. What's rising in the consciousness of all America is the crisis of men and how men are or not being nurtured in their transitions in life to mature and use their energies in ways that are productive, and they find it rewarding being productive. And that's the conversation in part that I'd like to pursue.
Thank you, and I'm really in alignment with you in pursuing that and discussing that because I'm not the kind of person who thinks that nothing can be done. I believe that something can be done, and I believe that you have some answers. So, as the president and director of Mankind Project Chicago, what are some of your thoughts of what we can do starting now?
So starting now, we're dealing with the effects side instead of the cause side. And so that's always the larger, looming, late fix that's being tried to be attached to earlier and earlier causes. So as the Mankind Project has been doing for 30 years, we provide a safe place where men can explore their vulnerabilities, those things that make them fearful, angry, or resentful, or inhibited, and try to nurture the male through the stages of his life in a way that makes him productive and strong, and he finds it rewarding to his own inner self to show up in a way that is generative, where he's creating things in his life, and he looks forward to the challenges of life. This has been an ongoing process through men's groups and weekends and trainings for now 30 years. We're here in Chicago, and we're making some inroads, proposing some major moves for the entire city.
Wow, that is wonderful. And how many people do you have working with you? I know that Mankind Project is all over. There's even an organization here in Atlanta. But how many people do you have working with you directly?
The Mankind Project is largely volunteer. So we have 5,000 members here in Chicago. I have a core of about 250 men that consistently for years come to volunteer to staff and do missions of service, which is these outreach pieces that we're doing here to go to communities and incorporate the men into another way of being.
I like that you say another way of being, because clearly, and this is not just Chicago, but this just happened in Chicago, and it stands out. And we've been hearing about Chicago for a long time, and to me, this is like completely unacceptable. And I don't think that you can have enough police officers because, as you said, we're dealing with the effect, and we've got to get to the cause of it. I know that there are more young men now than ever that are on, when they're young guys, young boys, that babies as far as I'm concerned, and when they're acting, they're play acting, and they're being rambunctious and inquisitive, and they're being expelled from preschool and daycare. And to me, this is unacceptable. Is it because we have not, as women, because most of the teachers in preschool and daycare, not all, but most of them are women, and so we have not been trained, or we've lost our training, lost our way in how to interact with babies who are rambunctious and inquisitive and like to play and run and jump and strike, and what is this cause, this effect? Where can we jump in faster than later?
With such a dominance of female positioning in places of power, be that teacher, the social worker, that the standards that are acceptable to women in the classroom doesn't quite fit for boys. Let me put it in this arena. The male mode of development and feeling, and how he connects with his emotions through his actions, has to be looked at from a male perspective, so that it has relevance and meaning through that perspective, so it can be transmuted into productiveness. And that psyche comes from encountering multi-generational men, and that's what's woefully absent. And what we're seeing is the affect of that.
Yes, I think that there's definitely a situation as far as there's a lack of multi-generational men. I grew up in Mississippi, and I remember my great-grandfather being very instrumental in our lives. We just looked up to him, and his word was, when he said something, it wasn't just the boys, it was all of them, but yet he was this big, powerful man, and was there for grandfather and my uncles and my brothers. We all looked up to him, but then there was this gentleness about him too, and that we all respected, and we all fell in line. But they don't have this family support, so what do you do?
So what do we do? I would reference everyone to maybe listen to our last program that you and I did around multi-generational effects, or the absence of that as effects, where women will tend to socialize. That seems to be inherent in many women, and they gravitate towards that. They want the feedback. They will take the risk to expose their vulnerability in order to get good information, to make a sound judgment. Men, on the other hand, intrinsically protect their vulnerabilities, because that means harm. And so to expose that in an unsafe environment is very fearful for men, and not having the exposure to, like you say, the wonderful, powerful, gentle, loving, compassionate, solid grandfather or uncle, the father himself, the brother, the neighbor, the teacher. Without these multiple influences on the young man, he cannot see how men handle these things illustrated to him that he can then model himself after. So instead he finds, and we find in our society, multi-generations of men that have been trying to be raised by wonderful women who are trying to instill good male attributes without the male having a contribution to that. It doesn't really anchor the man in his own masculinity. It helps him with his knowledge, but doesn't give him the root basis for him to look at his own emotional well-being and reference that with other men. So that all being absent, now we find the men don't mature. And as they start to act out, they're calling. They are calling for the other males to come in and help me. That's what they're saying. Help me. I don't know what to do with this feeling, with this energy, with this emotion. So the men have to be taught. In the absence of the teachers and the mentors, this is what we get.
I remember a few years ago we had a little, I think it was an Easter celebration or some holiday, and there were lots of children. As it started to rain, one family said, "Let's go," and I was searching for umbrellas for them, and the father said, "No, let's go." He's talking to his son, "Let's go." And he says, "I don't want to get wet, Dad." He says, "Come on, let's go. You can handle this." And I thought, wow, he's making his son go out in the rain. And my husband says, "Oh, he's not making him go out in the rain. It's good for him. Getting wet ever hurt a child?" And that was just such a different perspective. And mothers are more, I want him to have an umbrella, and a father would say, "No, man up. You can get wet. You'll dry off."
And that component, it can have both effects. If it's a loving place to say, "Okay, we're going to do this," man, lands a little different than saying, "Okay, man up, child. Man up if you're hurt. Man up if you're wounded. Man up, you can't feel your feelings." Done well, it's a wonderful teaching. Done poorly, it's a wounding.
And so could you describe what is done well? I use an example, a different example of a teaching moment.
Let's look at the initiatory process for young men. The old African proverb that says, if we don't initiate the boys, they will burn down the village just to feel the heat. So young men start to become, they call it going into the red. They're on fire. Full warrior. They're in their early teens. These are signals, and if we don't take the boys and initiate them, meaning take them slowly off of the grandiosity. What they used to do is to take the young men out, and they say it's time to start being with the men. And yes, the mothers say, "Oh my gosh, they're going to kill my boy. He's not ready." Yet there was a cooperation in the tribal cultures that said the women knew it was time. Sadly, they gave up their boys, but they knew they were going to get men in return. Yes, they were fearful, and in fact, maybe even put up a big fuss, but that was also part of the act. So the young men knew they cared, but it was time to go. And everyone understood that. So that's woefully missing. So initiation is a time of building up in one area of the man and deconstructing the boy. You do this with men. You do this over experiences with men. And the absence of this is what happens. The young men, in the absence of men, you can say father, the absence of remoteness of the father or men in his life creates a hole in the young man's heart and psyche. Now that hole gets filled up with demons, a distrust of older men and abandonment issues, and now the young man is acting out against older men, a distrust of other men, and he becomes a gang member to try and initiate himself and become a man. Now that's being guided by other boys. And what do you get when you get that? You get Lord of the Flies. It's puarchy, the rule of boys, and it's dangerous.
You're listening to The Chloe Show. I'm your host, Chloe Taylor Brown. And Glenn, I'm wanting to ask a question to piggyback on where we left off. Do you think that we could have this phenomenon that you described before the commercial break when there are fathers in the home?
The father in the home is also, I think, weighted too heavily alone, meaning so much has fallen on the father to be everything, and then now 60% of our homes are fatherless. So not only has a lot piled on him to be this apex for everything without the other men, but now so many men, I should say, are now absent and not part of their children's lives. We can call the men to try to mend those wounds and get back in the home, but I think the solution that we can apply is this. I'm going to call for every neighborhood to begin a men's group of their own. I'm going to ask the city of Chicago that at every ground zero location where a person was shot that we start a men's group in that neighborhood. And these men will be multi-generational. We've been doing men's groups for 30 years. We have 700 already. We know how to do this. To bring men from the very neighborhoods of all walks of life, those grandfathers we talked about, those young powerful men, the preachers, and we'll create men's safe circles where the men can come and grow each other and mentor each other as men. Now, it's a reasonable substitute because we can't fix the family dynamic. We can provide a service that we do here and have been doing for 30 years where men can come to exercise those kinds of muscles. Under guidance and tutelage.
And this would be the guys that you work with, the men that you work with that have been mentoring in the Mankind Project would be guiding the groups of men?
Yes, I would like to see a coalition. The President and My Brother's Keeper initiative was in part because of the teaching of the Mankind Project in the Boys to Men group that he fell in love with. The teaching of the Mankind Project international effort. So what I'm saying is yes. In combination, I believe, with My Brother's Keeper of the President, with our Mayor of the City of Chicago, and the departments I've been working with, we've already put on a couple of men's weekends for them. I believe we have the groundwork and the right players in line to launch a grassroots initiative to foster men's groups in the neighborhoods. So we're not, policing's great, taking away guns is important. Men in these neighborhoods holding space for other men is, for me, for this man, that will change our future.
Wow, I like that. And that has to be something that is
balanced, trained in the man. So, my friends, men, that's what your power is for. Your power is to take a stand. Your power is to hold ground. Your power is to be of service, to help see things grow and people grow around you. That's a male that we long for, that we revere, and we don't celebrate that. I should say, it's rarely celebrated. So we may be running out of time, so let's ask this. Will we elevate two things? One, the male mode of feeling, meaning how he has to be grown, and provide the services with the depth of understanding and compassion that we have for the young women. Give the same allowances to the men and provide the opportunities for that to happen. And number two, provide in our communities. Connect with me, Glenn Barker at MKP Chicago, and look to provide for your community, in the absence of so many men, a men's group that can form, so that we can try to provide some semblance of what a men's community looks like for these younger men. Number three, in Chicago, I'm hoping to create a universal model that can be moved across the cities of the country. So in the meantime, connect with Glenn Barker at the Mankind Project Chicago, 312-243-6743. 312-243-6743. The call out is for leaders, concerned citizens, philanthropic organizations, anybody who wants to invest in our young men, call me.
Wow, thank you so very much, Glenn. It is always my pleasure to connect with you on the Chloe Show. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I feel your spirit. I know that you care. I know that you're doing great work, and the work that you're doing is not only for young men, it is for adult men of all ages to come to find themselves, to connect with their warriors, the king, the lover, the musician, and all of them. And I thank you so very much. And please know that this will not be the last time that you will be on the Chloe Show.
Thank you, Jade. Thank you, Chloe.
What an amazing show that we've been having today on the Chloe Show. I'm your host, Chloe Taylor Brown, and our guests today were the amazing Mr. Glenn Barker of Mankind Project Chicago. And goodbye for now. Women and girls around the world, you've been listening to The Chloe Show with Chloe Taylor Brown and Jade Sherrill, and we want you to be brave and bold in your dreams. Believe that you are excellent. Know that you are intelligent, savvy, and beautiful. Believe in yourself and your world. Take the first step. And until next time, you can always connect with us at ChloeTaylorBrown.com. We'll see you next Wednesday from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on The Chloe Show. Goodbye for now.